In the flickering candlelight of a Boston parsonage, a chained man utters words that will echo through centuries: "I cannot get the smallpox." From the scorching sands of West Africa to the frozen docks of New England, one enslaved soul's secret unleashes a revolution in medicine. But heroes like him are buried in footnotes, their chains heavier than history's ink. Welcome to Hidden Black History, where we unearth the truths empires tried to erase. Today, we dive into the life of Onesimus, the African whose wisdom tamed the deadliest plague known to man. Beneath the unyielding gaze of Puritan steeples, a warrior from the Gold Coast arrives not as conqueror, but as cargo, his body bound, his mind a vault of ancient remedies waiting to be cracked. The year is 1706. Cotton Mather, the towering Puritan minister whose shadow looms over Boston's moral landscape, stands at the slave auction block. His congregation has pooled resources to purchase a young man from West Africa, shipping him across the Atlantic in the bowels of a vessel reeking of despair. This man, ripped from the vibrant markets of Cormants in modern-day Ghana, a coastal stronghold where Akan traders bartered gold for guns, bears no name of his own upon arrival. Mather dubs him Onesimus, after the biblical slave who redeems himself through usefulness. Irony drips from the choice, a man whose very essence will prove indispensable, yet remain invisible. Onesimus steps onto Massachusetts soil amid a colony where slavery festers like an open sore. By 1700, roughly 1,000 enslaved Africans toil in Boston, the first arrivals having docked in 1638 aboard the Desire, a ship that traded rum for human lives in the Caribbean. These were not passive souls, they were survivors of the Middle Passage, a hellish voyage where 15 to 20% perished from disease, starvation, and the lash. Onesimus, likely in his 20s, emerges hardened. His homeland, the Gold Coast, pulses with communal wisdom, healers known as Okomfo who wield herbs and incisions against ailments. Smallpox, the curse of the gods, ravages there too, but Africans have long mastered its fury through variolation, a ritual scarification embedding the virus's essence to forge immunity. Mather's household becomes Onesimus's prison and proving ground. The minister, scarred by his role in the 1692 Salem witch trials where spectral evidence condemned innocence, views slavery through a lens of divine duty. He preaches conversion: enslaved Africans must be baptized, educated in scripture, to save their heathen souls. Yet suspicion taints his benevolence. In his diaries, Mather brands Onesimus pretty intelligent, but wicked, a thievish figure requiring constant vigilance. Onesimus tends fires, mends clothes, and absorbs the rhythms of this alien world, sermons thundering from pulpits, ships groaning in the harbor, the constant whisper of smallpox's threat. Boston in the early 1700s is a tinderbox of contradictions. Puritan piety clashes with commercial greed, the colony's laws codify bondage, denying enslaved people rights to assembly or testimony. Onesimus navigates this minefield with quiet acuity. He marries within the small black community, fathering a son who tragically dies in 1714, a loss etched in sparse church records. Partial manumission glimmers on the horizon, he scrapes together coin to buy a sliver of freedom, only for Mather to reinvest it in another slave, perpetuating the cycle. Daily life grinds, dawn rouses him to chores, evenings to Mather's interrogations on faith. But Onesimus carries unseen treasures. In African lore, variolation traces to ancient practices, documented by travelers like Lady Mary Wortley Montagu who observed it in Ottoman courts, but rooted deeper in West African soil. Scars on his arm, deliberate, ritual, mark his initiation. As a youth, a healer pricked his skin with a thorn dipped in pustule fluid from a mild case, sparking fever but sealing protection. This knowledge simmers unspoken, a weapon against the invisible enemy stalking colonial ports. By 1716, curiosity cracks Mather's facade. Over a mundane query, has Onesimus ever had smallpox? The enslaved man replies cryptically, yes and no. What follows is revelation. He rolls up his sleeve, revealing the telltale scars. I cannot get the smallpox, he declares, explaining the operation, a precise incision, pus from an infected sore rubbed in, a controlled blaze that burns out the disease's power forever. Mather, ever the scholar, scribbles furiously. This is no sorcery, it's science from the Garamantes, Mather's mangled term for Onesimus's people. The minister pens a letter to the Royal Society in London, touting the new method used by the Africans and Asiatics. Yet credit curdles, Onesimus's words become Mather's wisdom. In the parsonage's dim glow, the enslaved healer's voice fades behind his master's quill. Outside, Boston buzzes unaware that a plague looms, one that will test this borrowed knowledge to its limits. Onesimus, useful at last, stands at history's threshold, chained, but unchained in intellect. In a single scarred forearm lies the blueprint to defy death, a map drawn in African blood, now thrust into the cold hands of colonial curiosity. Spring 1716 dawns crisp over Boston Harbor, where Onesimus labors in Mather's shadow. The minister, his mind a whirlwind of theology and experiment, probes deeper into the enslaved man's past. Smallpox haunts the colony's edges, outbreaks flicker like distant fires, claiming lives in Philadelphia and New York. Mather, voracious for knowledge, circles back to his query. Onesimus, sleeves rolled in the kitchen's heat, meets his gaze. Have you had the smallpox? The answer hangs, yes and no. He extends his arm, the skin a canvas of deliberate marks, 2 faint pockmarks, relics of ritual. What unfolds is no idle tale, but a précis of survival honed across generations. Onesimus recounts the Variolation ceremony from his Gold Coast youth. In villages ringed by palm groves, when pox swept through, elders selected the resilient, children or young warriors with strong constitutions. A healer, often a woman versed in herbal lore, prepared the agent, fluid milked from a pustule of a survivor whose case burned mild, not furious. With a thorn or lancet, she scored the skin, a shallow cross on the forearm or thigh, deep enough to weep but not to scar wildly. The pus, diluted perhaps with ash or saliva for potency, was daubed in. Fever followed, 3 days of torment, rash blooming like war paint, but survival meant lifelong armor. Whoever had the courage to use it was forever free of the fear of contagion, Onesimus affirms, his voice steady. Mather listens, rapt. This is variolation, though the term emerges later from European tongues. In Africa, it predates recorded history. Arab traders carried whispers of it from the Sahel to Constantinople by the 10th century. Chinese texts from the 16th century echo similar scars, but West African methods, communal, empirical, birthed it organically. Onesimus's people, the Fanti, or Akan, integrated it into rites. Post-scar, the initiate drank shea butter tonics, isolated in huts painted with protective symbols. Mortality hovered at 1 to 2%, a gamble against smallpox's 30% slaughter. The minister's quill raises. He interrogates, how select the donor? A mild case, Onesimus explains, to temper the blaze. Age? The young, resilient. Season? Dry months, lest monsoons swell the wound. Mather cross-references. Lady Montague's 1717 letters from Turkey describe nasal insufflation, powder from scabs sniffed into nostrils, but Onesimus's cutaneous method aligns closer to Indian practices, via African routes. Excitement surges, Mather sees providence. God, he posits, plants truths in heathen lands for Christian harvest. By autumn, Mather dispatches his epistle to the Royal Society, London's vanguard of inquiry. The Africans have a way, he writes, crediting my servant Onesimus obliquely. The letter, dated October 1716, details the process: incision, inoculation, isolation. It languishes in archives, but seeds are sown. Mather experiments tentatively, on a neighbor's child, then his own household, noting milder courses. Onesimus oversees, his hands guiding the blade, a ghost in his master's glory. Yet erasure creeps, Mather's diary lauds the infallibly safe method, but frames it as divine revelation through African conduit. Onesimus, thievish in prior entries, morphs to informant. No portrait exists, his face lost to time. In Boston's taverns, tales twist, African superstition peddled by a sly slave. Onesimus presses on, his partial freedom a hollow coin. He weds again, perhaps, in the flickering black church networks defying colonial bans. This revelation ripples subtly. Physicians like Boylston, Mather's acquaintance, take note. Smallpox, vectored by trade winds and slave ships, where hold stewed with vomit and fever, claims 400,000 Europeans yearly. In America, it decimates, 90% mortality among unexposed natives. Onesimus's scar becomes a beacon, dimmed by prejudice. As 1717 unfolds, Mather publishes sermons weaving the tale, urging trials. Resistance simmers, preachers decry meddling with God's will, physicians scoff at barbarous arts. Onesimus, ever useful, fades into domesticity. But fate coils, a ship from the West Indies nears, its timbers laced with virus. The secret, once whispered, awaits its roar. From the fetid hold of a Caribbean sloop slithers death into Boston's veins, a plague that turns mothers to specters and streets to pyres, blind to the antidote slumbering in an enslaved man's memory. April 1721, the Seahorse docks at Long Wharf, its sails furled against a chill Atlantic breeze. Among its passengers, a tailor from Barbados coughs, subtle at first, then racking. Smallpox, that merciless leveler, has hitched the ride. The virus, Variolation major, incubates silently, 10 to 14 days of stealth before eruption. By May, pustules bloom on the tailor's skin, weeping contagion. He expires in quarantine, but too late, the pox leaps to contacts, dockworkers, merchants, the enslaved hauling crates. Boston, a bustling port of 11,000 souls crammed into a peninsula, ignites. The disease thrives in tenements, narrow alleys where Puritan families huddle with indentured servants and Africans. Transmission is airborne, droplet-borne, domestic, linens, door handles, the very air thick with breath. Symptoms strike, fever spikes to 104 degrees Fahrenheit, headaches pound like war drums, vomiting sours the gut. Then the rash, macules on face and hands, swelling to vesicles, bursting into suppurating craters. Scabs form, black as sin, survivors bear pockmarks, the blind lose sight. Panic metastasizes. The selectmen decree isolation, infected homes marked with red flags, the sick carted to Spectacle Island's pest house, a ramshackle barracks amid tidal flats. Funerals multiply, carts rumble nightly, tolling bells announce the dead. By June, half the city sickens, physicians, overwhelmed, bleed patients per humoral theory, weakening them further. Mortality climbs, 1 in 7 succumb, bodies bloating in summer heat. The elite flee to country estates, the poor, trapped, perish in droves. Enslaved communities, iron-forged in resilience, fare marginally better, variolation scars shield some, but grief ravages, Onesimus's circles mourn lost kin. Mather, from his North End parsonage, watches horror unfold. Sermons thunder warnings, God's judgment on sin, yet mercy via providence. He recalls Onesimus's words, penned 5 years prior. The enslaved man, now a fixture in the household, confirms, this is the foe his ritual tamed. Variolation's logic gleams, expose control, reap immunity. But doubt festers, the colony's elite, steeped in Galenic medicine, dismiss African tricks. Enter Zabdiel Boylston, Boston's premier surgeon, Mather's ally. A ruddy farmer physician, Boylston tends the elite but heeds the minister's plea. On June 26, he acts, lancet to his 6-year-old son's arm, pus from a mild case rubbed in. Fever grips the boy, delirium, rash, but breaks mild. Emboldened, Boylston inoculates 2 enslaved men in his employ, than a slave child. Success whispers, symptoms contained, no fatalities. News spreads like the pox itself. By July, 50 inoculated, August swells to 150. Boylston logs meticulously, incisions heal clean, immunity holds. Yet backlash erupts. The New England Courant, James Franklin's satirical rag, Benjamin's Brothers' venture, lampoons, Cotton Mather, that busy man, has been very forward to persuade people to the new way of curing the smallpox by inoculation. Editorials rage, unnatural, ungodly, a popish plot. Religious fervor boils. Pastors sermonize, smallpox is divine scourge, thwarting it invites wrath. One minister thunders from the Old South Meeting House, to prevent it spreading by inoculation, is a direct action against the revealed will of God. Racial venom laces the vitriol, an African method for savage slaves, unfit for godly folk. Mobs prowl, effigies burn, threats scrawl on doors. Onesimus, spectral in the fray, aids covertly. He sources pus, from a quarantine survivor, vetted for mild strain, and demonstrates scarring on his own flesh. Mather shields him, but peril mounts. The epidemic peaks, 844 dead by winter's thaw, 14% of Boston. Uninoculated households crumble, inoculated thrive. Boylston's tally, 242 procedures, 6 deaths, 1 in 40, versus 1 in 7 natural. As snow dusts the commons, the pox wanes, starved by winter. But scars linger, on flesh, on society. Onesimus, witness to apocalypse, ponders his partial liberty, freedom bought, but not bestowed. The secret, once private, now public peril. Boston exhales, but history pivots on this precipice. A grenade shatters glass in a minister's window, pews sputtering with racial rage, yet in the debris, a lancet gleams, carving paths through prejudice's iron grip. November 1721, Boston's cobblestones slick with frost, but tempers blaze. Boylston's inoculations surge past 200, Mather's pamphlets flood presses. The duo's alliance, cleric and surgeon, defies orthodoxy. Boylston, sleeves rolled in his surgery, repeats the rite, sterilize lancet in rum, score the deltoid, a quarter-inch cross, daub pus harvested under moonless skies. Patients quarantine 3 weeks, fevers forge tempers immunity. Onesimus, Mather's unseen sentinel, vets donors, only vesicular fluid from day 4 rashes, ensuring virulence without lethality. Success mounts empirically. Among 242 variolated, mortality, 6, for slaves, 2 whites, yielding 2.5% fatality. Contrast the wild pox, 844 corpses, 14% cull. Inoculees like Governor Schutz's aide emerge unscathed, testimonials ripple. Mather crows in, the angel of Bethesda, a most wonderful remedy, from the Negroes. Yet the tome, rushed to print, buries Onesimus in aggregate, my servant, among Africans. Fury coalesces. The Courant escalates, cartoons depict Mather as quack, Boylston as butcher. Villainy of the worst sort, rails an editorial, imputing conspiracy. Racial barbs sting, procedure, fit only for brutes, peddled by a Garamantee savage. Enslaved informants face lashes, free blacks shunned. Religious ire peaks, Anglican rector cries apostasy, invoking Jobs boils as God's decree. November 13th, night cloaks the north end. A crude bomb, powder keg, nail-studded, hurtles through Mather's parlor window. It sputters, fails to ignite fully, but shards fly. Attached note snarls, cotton thou dog, damn the, I'll inoculate thee with the POX. Mather, unscathed, preaches next Sabbath, the wrath of man shall praise thee. Boylston flees threats, inoculating in barns. Onesimus navigates the maelstrom. He forges networks, whispers in black enclaves yield pus from scarred survivors, variolated in secret per African custom. His counsel refines, dilute with water for children, bind wounds with plantain leaves, Gold Coast echoes in New England frost. Mather credits divine illumination, but Onesimus's hand steadies the blade. By December, the tide turns. Inoculation chambers sprout, Boylston trains apprentices, rates plummet. The pox, isolated, ebbs. Harvard faculty, initial foes, concede, a 1,722 report lauds singular efficacy. Royal Society nods, Timone's Turkish letters corroborate. Yet cost extracts. Boylston's son, first subject, bears pockmarks lifelong. Mather's repute phrase, witch hunter reborn as heretic. Onesimus, ever peripheral, barters for manumission, £50 to Mather for a replacement slave, buying half freedom, still bound to service. Church rolls note his piety, baptized 1724, perhaps wedding again. Opposition's embers forge progress. Variolation spreads, Philadelphia 1724, London 1722 via Maitland's trials. But shadows linger, 1% risk dooms the poor, elites hoard access. Onesimus's voice, once thunder, mutes in ledgers. As 1722 blooms, Boston rebuilds. Graves settle, but the Lancet's legacy scars deeper than pox. Defiance wins, yet at what price to the defiant? A world declares victory over the pox in 1980, bells tolling eradication, but whose hand, long severed from history's page, gripped the first thread of that triumph? 1722 fades into ledgered calm, Boston's pyres cold. Variolation, Onesimus's gift, metastasizes. By 1730, colonial ports routinated, Charleston mandates for slaves, shielding trade. Mather dies 1728, lauded as pioneer, Boylston pens memoirs, etching European parallels. Onesimus outlives, sparse traces, 1730 church aid for his ailments, perhaps freed fully by 1740s. No grave marks him, erased as his homeland's maps. The method evolves. Risk, that 1 to 2% grave dance, spurs refinement. 1796, Edward Jenner, Gloucestershire surgeon, pivots to cowpox, milder cousin, harvested from dairymaid's blisters. His 1798 treatise, Inquiry, ignites vaccination, scratch with vaccinia virus, immunity sans smallpox peril. Jenner's nod to African inoculation footnotes Onesimus obliquely, crediting Oriental routes. Momentum builds. 1809, Massachusetts legislates Jennerian vaccine, first mandatory in West. Napoleon inoculates Grande Armée, Jefferson champions at Monticello. 19th century, global crusades. Louis Pasteur adapts for rabies, cholera, Vaughan bearing antitoxins for diphtheria. But roots trace to that 1716 scar. 20th century, WHO's assault. 1967, intensified campaign, ring vaccination, surveillance. Bill Foge strategy, isolate outbreaks, vaccinate contacts. Soviet jets drop lyophilized doses over Siberia, African teams trek Congo trails. 1977, last wild case, Somalia's Ali Malmalan. 1980, Geneva declares eradication, sole human disease vanquished, sparing 300 million yearly. Billions breathe free, veins laced with legacy. Yet Onesimus, buried. Textbooks hail Jenner, father of immunology, Mather, American inoculator. Structural racism, that edifice of omission, cements it. Enslaved knowledge deemed derivative, primitive. Mather's diaries, sole source, subordinate, Onesimus as tool, not title. Implicit bias in curricula, black pioneers like Onesimus, Crumpler, Drew, sideline. History, puzzle incomplete, favors powers pieces. Rediscovery stirs. 20th century scholars, Boylston's descendants, Africanist historians, exhume. 2019, History.com Spotlights, 2021, COVID Parallels Invoke His Shadow. Black History Month revives, Who is Onesimus? Queries surge. Monuments? None. But whispers amplify, in vaccine equity debates, his name invokes justice, enslaved wisdom fueling modern mandates. Legacy pulses, every flu shot, COVID jab echoes Variolation's logic, controlled exposure, collective shield. Onesimus, from Cormont's chains to global veins, proves, hidden hands HEW history's arc. To forget is to rechain, to remember, to liberate. That's the untold saga of Onesimus, a testament to resilience forged in forgotten fires. If this hidden chapter moved you, hit that like button, subscribe to Hidden Black History for more unearthed truths on Africa's unbreakable legacy, and drop a comment, which overlooked hero should we spotlight next? Watch our playlist on Black innovators who changed the world. Share this far and wide, history thrives when we all hold the light. Peace, knowledge seekers. Until next time.